This girl laughed, climbed out of the tree, and tried to break into my car at 4 a.m. Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 a.m. each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood. In a very wealthy town suburb, employees had to park in one of two parking lots at either ends of the property, and the lot I chose was adjacent to a long and windy road outside the resort, which led to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and resort were separated by a short range of brush and trees that no one ever walked through. I had arrived one morning per usual and put the car into park with my headlights still on. The lights in the lot weren't ever on in the morning, since no one else really showed up before 6 a.m. when the sun was out, so it was usually always dark at the start of my walk. Except for security, I was one of the first employees to arrive on the property each morning and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different. I had my hand literally at my keys, my brain in the process to turn off my car, when I noticed a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15 years old, come scampering. Her body language was the exact definition: run with quick light steps, especially through fear or excitement. Through the span of trees that separates the resort from the outside road, she was directly in front of my car, and my headlights illuminated a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was in high school, had long blonde hair, and was wearing a jacket with pajamas maybe, like she just walked out of a house. One thing about her that bothered me was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car, but she was visually giggling at something I wasn't aware of or could see, and it was so unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her as if someone else were there waiting away from the headlights. She then waved at me like it was a normal gesture at this time, and then immediately ran to my passenger side door. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening besides my anxiety spiking up. I know I simultaneously yanked the aux from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panic for never remembering if it's up or down to lock when the girl began pulling violently and incessantly on the door handle. I realized because I didn't turn my car off, it stayed locked. She began pounding on the window, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this were some type of game, as if I were a silly friend, not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped the pounding and tried to open my door. Her face fell flat like I disappointed her, and she started to walk away from my car back the way she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees, out of the view of my headlights. This whole encounter confused me almost as much as it scared me. Creepy encounter after fender bender. I was leaving work, about to get on the interstate when a van rear-ended my car, and we pulled off onto the curb on the entry of the highway. I've always been told to get out and exchange information if this were to happen, so that's what I did. I'm a 32-year-old female, and I got out and told the guy I'm going to call the police to get them to come do an accident report. So I call the police, and they say they'll come out and take the report. I tell the guy they're on their way. He apologized and said okay, but that the cops knew who he was and had been dealing with him for a while, and he was probably going to jail. I felt shaken up due to the impact, and my head felt weird, and honestly, I wasn't thinking clearly that this was a red flag. Then he asked how old I was, kissed my hand, and said he'd wish he'd met me another way, and that he'd just gotten back from Iraq. The more he talked, the more I realized he was likely intoxicated. I go to my car, and he moved his van from behind my car to in front of mine. He came up again and started saying, "Gosh, you have a pretty smile. I wish I'd met you another way. And gosh, why couldn't you be somebody ugly?" And he looked at me weirdly and said he felt like he was in love. Then a cop stopped and said another policeman was on the way. After he pulled off, the guy that hit my car said, "That guy was looking at you the whole time, and he didn't look at me at all, douchebag. Don't you marry that guy or I will hate you." I thought that was weird. Then he said, "I killed 18 civilians in Iraq, and come walk with me. That guy told me for you to come walk with me. I'm not gonna do anything. And he tried to aggressively open my locked car door. He walked away and I drove off and went to the police station. This was in a 45-minute time period. In hindsight, I'm not getting out of my car until the cops show up. Be careful. If you get into a fender bender, you don't know if they're intoxicated or a mentally unstable person. Grabbed to a man's bed when I was living in his home. I was traveling to another town because I was looking for job opportunities there, and the landlord of my current apartment has a friend there. He said that friend said that I can stay with him for a few days, and he has contacts with employers. I called the man and he said I am welcome to come and that he lives with his family. I thought that if it was someone that was referenced, it should be fine. After I arrived, things were normal at first. Then I realized he was divorced and his kids did not live there right now. On the first day, he suggested we go to the beach. During the whole time, he started mentioning many topics about sex. It was very creepy and off-putting, which I then told him it's very weird to talk about this to a stranger. Sometimes he would say gross things like, I don't think you will find a young man to marry. Maybe you should find an old man my age, which I replied I'm not interested. He started a weird conversation that I try to make funny. He was very creepy, telling me there's a nude beach with women down the road, and I told him there's a gay nude beach where I live with naked men, and he was really grossed out by that. He seemed to be a bit too touchy too. Another incident was when I was on the beach and he suddenly lifted me up because the road was rocky. I told him to let me down a few times, and I told him that this is not okay. I don't like to be touched and don't do it again. When we went home and he continued to rant about his ex-wife and how gay people are sick in the head, I was very uncomfortable living with him. So my idea was to put a chair on my door so he can't enter my room, and I decided to look for another place to live at. And I ultimately did. I found a hotel that I will be booking for the next couple of days. However, this night, I couldn't sleep at all because it was so hot, and I felt genuinely uncomfortable living with him. I woke up and went to the living room to get some fresh air. He woke me up and saw me. Out of nowhere, started hugging me. He then lifted me up and grabbed me to his bed. It was very hard to resist. He wrapped his legs around me and tried to kiss my head. I started to try to distract him by saying how hot it is and he needs to open the patio doors. Luckily, it worked. The moment I was free, I ran out to the patio, which was on the ground floor with neighbors next door. I then told him how his behavior was frightening. I said he needs to back off and I'm calling my mom. He then just backed up into his room to go back to sleep. I then did call my mom and asked her what I should do. She told me to quietly pack up and leave. So I went back to my room and put a chair on my door and packed up my bag and left at 4 in the morning. I called an Uber and sat on the bench of the train station for hours and got a ticket home. He started calling me at 9 and asked me where I was. I then blocked his number and never contacted him again.